There was a time not that long ago where the idea of a developer releasing a on-rails shooter game was barely short of being outright haram or verboten, something so blasphemous that it should be avoided at all possible cost. However, it would seem that on-rail games are now so few and far between that the sight of a new one on the Steam store page is something to be encouraged, not something to be shunned. Such is the case with House of the Dead Remake. It will probably surprise no one to note that this is a direct remake of the original House of the Dead arcade and console game from back in the 90s, back when we actually had arcades you could physically go to. Sadly, I was born into the last generation to grow up with arcade machines, so it's not something I'll have the opportunity to pass on to the next generation. As a result of this rapid erosion of local arcades, a lot of games have disappeared over the years, only to be preserved via the few remaining surviving arcade machines and through emulation, which has always been an unreliable means of restoration. It's with this firmly in mind that I welcome the idea of companies like Megapixel here revitalizing their game for Steam, where a new generation of players can potentially appreciate it. But what is there to appreciate, if anything, you might ask? Well, as the title indicates, we're going to talk about that right now. The original House of the Dead game was released in arcades initially on September 13, 1996 in Japan, and was subsequently followed by the game's Western release on March 4th, 1997, making this more or less the 25th anniversary of the game's release here in the West. House of the Dead, both the remake and the original, share a simple, identical premise. You start your day like any other, only to find that a zombie apocalypse has unexpectedly and spontaneously started up right under your nose, as the typical result of a scientific experiment gone horribly, horribly wrong. Because of course, if it's a zombie apocalypse story, governmental or private sector incompetence is usually the main contributing factor as to why, with bonus points if some kind of Illuminati-like secret cabal is involved. You, the player, take on the role of Special Agent Thomas Rogan, who's called in by his desperate fiancée Sophie, who needs you to single-handedly save the day by saving her and the other researchers trapped at the mansion where the zombie outbreak is initially taking place. Now, if you're a decent human being who cares deeply about heroic actions and ideals, you'll do exactly that. Or if you're more like me, you'll take obvious extreme pleasure in deliberately refusing to distinguish between the innocent researchers and the obviously villainous zombies. Just shoot them both and don't take any chances. Since we're now living in an age where seemingly every shooter game is always being compared to either Doom Eternal or Fortnite, the House of the Dead remake is very much an odd title to release in the current market. Most younger players who never had the opportunity to play the original arcade game will probably not care for the restrictive nature of the game's entirely on-rails combat. But for the rest of us that are old enough to remember and appreciate holding the wired light guns in our hands, shooting at the arcade screen, reenacting that same feel with a mouse and keyboard is more than a acceptable consolation prize. The controls are, for the most part, fairly responsive, and the remaster quality is almost perfect in many regards. It looks like everything was either completely redesigned from the ground up, or significantly upscaled and refined in order to maintain high visual quality on even high-end monitors. I had an absolute blast reliving old memories by playing through the classic arcade mode. The problem is that while the old has been refined to near perfection, there is very little in the vein of new content. I should probably mention that for reason passing human understanding, the developers and publisher made the decision to charge a base retail price of $24.99 USD for the game, knowing full well that even a casual playthrough of the campaign would last 25 to 30 minutes. That's it. You're literally paying $1 a minute of gameplay featured here. At that point, you're basically spending $25 on a glorified paid demo. And some might say, well, that's how the original game was, it's how long it was. And that is absolutely true. But were I in an arcade today that featured the game, that would only cost me maybe 25 or 50 cents to play, not $25. Even if you die once or twice along the way, you're still only making a total investment of maybe $1 at most, maybe $1.50. Nothing close to $25. While I didn't think it was very likely that the developers would create a new second campaign with additional levels in order to justify the price, I'd hoped that maybe they'd add multiple challenge modes with special unlocks or modifiers to further incentivize players to replay this half-hour-long campaign again and again and again, to at least grind out 2 or 3 hours worth of playtime. Maybe do something like what Tripwire Interactive does with Killing Floor 2 and create basic reskins of the zombies and maps. I wouldn't mind seeing zombies wearing Santa Claus red suits and white beards, or maybe have a summer theme where the zombies are all wearing bikinis and summer trunks. House of the Dead, like most 90s light gun arcade games, was always a bit absurd, so I don't think a bit of added absurdity in this remake would feel at all out of place. But even if they didn't want to do that, adding in a few new guns or enemy types would have been another alternative that could have gone a long way towards spicing things up. Turning over to the few new things the developers did add, House of the Dead Remake brings with it a new photo mode system, which if you've played a modern game on PS5, 4, or PC, you probably know what that kind of thing is already. A new achievement system, and a new 3D interactable gallery of all the monsters you faced in the game, all of which collectively amounts to a nice set of small bonus features for players both old and new. Most notable of these new inclusions, however, is the aforementioned all-new game mode, Horde mode. Horde mode functions as a more high-intensity version of the classic campaign. While one can't technically refer to it as an additional higher difficulty standard, it instead functions as a more obvious cooperative multiplayer experience. While the story and locations play out exactly the same, the player will encounter double if not triple the usual number of zombies in each encounter. While it is more than possible for a single player to commit to a successful playthrough without losing too many lives in the process, I'd strongly recommend you plan on bringing along a buddy as backup. However, if you plan to do that, you'd better plan on being in the same room. The biggest thing holding back House of the Dead Remake is easily the lack of support for online play. While there's no denying that the original arcade game could only be played cooperatively side by side with your partner, this is not the 1990s anymore, and this game isn't being played off a physical 6-foot-tall machine, but rather an individual computer in the modern age, where most people play together remotely. While writing a new netcode to support online play would have required a bit more effort from the developers, the ease of multiplayer access it would have provided the player base would have been an enormous credit to the game. As it stands right now, unless you're one of the lucky few whose setup and social circle allow for frequent in-person PC gaming opportunities, the decision to not include drop-in drop-out online multiplayer comes across as a definite missed opportunity. House of the Dead Remake, as a simple remaster essentially, is an excellent example of what a remaster or remake is supposed to be. It gives the original game a visual facelift while going to the extreme not to tamper with the familiar gameplay and aesthetic that longtime fans have come to know and appreciate. But anyone would be hard-pressed to consider this a full remake rather than a remaster. Where the game begins to flounder is in regards to the very limited pool of new content. This lack of online multiplayer support, combined with the aforementioned limited supply of new content to keep fans occupied beyond the first hour, makes it hard to justify the $24.99 retail price. If the game had launched at $10 or $15 instead, these limited editions might have been an easier pill to swallow. But as it stands, while the small additions and changes might prove to be a love letter to existing fans, House of the Dead Remake doesn't do much to appeal to potentially new fans along the way as well. If you're looking for a bit of nostalgic fun and you're willing to pay a ridiculously high amount of money for a limited amount of content, then yeah, I would recommend playing House of the Dead Remake. But if you don't have a lot of money to be spending on games, but yet are still interested in this game, I'd recommend waiting for a good Steam sale before picking up House of the Dead. Wait for it to drop to, say, $10. This is easily a $10 game in my mind, maybe $15 at most if I'm being generous. No way in the undead hell of commercial marketing is this simple remake, or remaster more accurately, worth $25 out of your pocket though. Don't buy this at full price. Whatever you do, just don't. You'll save yourself a lot of money and effort. At any rate though, that's where I think I'm going to wrap it up for today. As ever, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to click the like button and comment below what you think of the game. Comments really help my videos get boosted in the algorithm, and plus I read and respond to nearly all the comments I get, so even if you want to drop a comment just to say hi or get my opinion on something, even if it's unrelated, I'll be more than happy to chat with you down below. Likewise, subscribing and clicking the bell really helps. I know it's cliche, but the YouTube algorithm, again, is a pain in the ass to deal with, doubly so as a small channel. This is Warrior Dan signing out. Stay awesome, everybody. Stay safe and peace out.